Hi, I am Irena. I'm CEO of Valueverse, and I have the pleasure to being joined for a conversation by Mo, the head of Tokenomics of Animoca. So our topic is called Building Sustainable Ecosystems. And I would first like to zoom in a little bit because we will kind of like end up with the ecosystem, but we will start with product. Because to build a sustainable ecosystem, you need to have it filled with sustainable product. And to build a sustainable product, you need to have a product market fit. And with that, I would direct my first question to Mo about like what is the strategy of finding the product market fit, and when and how does the token actually enter the game?
Absolutely, and I think like everything Brett was talking about and the questions being asked is a perfect segue into what we're about to discuss. I think what we've seen in the data that was presented just minutes ago is there is not a lot of stickiness when it comes to airdrops. We see on average 80%, I think it was 83% or 82% that Brett shared, of airdrops are actually dumped. And the reason for that is we're acquiring the wrong user type. What we've seen is if there is a product in Web3 that revolves around economic value, then you tend to have users coming into an ecosystem because the majority of users in Web3, unfortunately, are after ROI. But what we're not seeing is any product market fit in Web2. And when I say that is what you're really as a founder, how many of us are founders in the room, just to get a gauge? Excellent. How many of us are crypto enthusiasts? How many of us are degens? How many of us have bridged tokens to a different chain? Okay, quite a few of us. Okay, so I've gauged where we're at as a collective. I think what we're tending to see is a lot of projects that are not infra-based or DeFi-based are actually building for applications in the real world, but the users of the tokens are in Web3. So what you're actually doing is building two different sets of products. You're building your product for Web2, if that's social fi, it could be gaming, it could be one of many different things. But then the token you're actually launching is not really applicable to Web2 users. So you're having to design a different product set around the token itself. And we see the token as a product, and it makes sense from an infra perspective. Yes, it can be used as gas. Maybe we can use it as governance, even though governance hasn't been that successful as of yet in the space. But what we're not seeing is two different sets of products. I remember speaking with a number of founders saying, we're building for Web 2.5. How many of us believe Web 2.5 actually exists? How many of us believe it? I don't believe it exists, but I'm just intrigued to see who does, and hardly any hands went up. And the reason for that is if you look at the overlap of the Venn diagram between those who are crypto native and those who are not, by definition, there really shouldn't be an overlap between both. So all of a sudden you have two very different user types, so you need two very different types of products to be able to engage those users. And I think going back to the question you were asking earlier, where does the sustainability come from? It's for designing for both of these in mind from a product perspective. We're designing to be able to onboard users in a Web 2 sense for whatever the underlying product is, but they have very little understanding. And I think with the scores Brett was using, most of those users are between a 0 to 1 score. So all of a sudden they're not going to engage in the DeFi aspect, which is really one of the core drivers of crypto. And I will ask a quick question to the audience. What do we think the most successful use case of crypto has been so far? Just shout out answers. Social fi. What else do we think? Trading. Stable coins. Speculation. So for me, it's actually stable coins has been the most successful use case of crypto. Why? Because it transcends national boundaries. It allows people to interact with something that has value. When we look at what's happening around the world with inflation, and it's affecting many different countries, they're looking to get access to a more stable unit economics, which is what the US dollar. That becomes very difficult to acquire. So what's the next best thing? It's either Bitcoin or stable coins for people to be able to transact. So I'll pause there because I've gone off on a bit of a tangent, but you can start to see that if you're building for Web 2, there needs to be PMF there, but there needs to be product market fit for the token as well. And that's what we're not seeing in the space, which is why so many people are dumping. I'll actually go on for one more thing. The game is rigged. You can quote me on that. What we're seeing is for a lot of founders, when they want to launch a token, they'll go to an exchange. Excellent, we want a list. An exchange like you need 100,000 followers on Twitter. You need 100,000 users in the Discord. How do you bootstrap that? Well, you join some of these questing platforms, follow, like, retweet, do some kind of activations, and then they go to the exchanges and the VCs. Look, we've got the numbers that you guys have been asking for. But what happens next? You've acquired the farmers fundamentally. You're not acquiring actual users or community members for your ecosystem, which is why when the airdrop happens, everyone sells. it's a cash grab. That doesn't mean they haven't provided some form of value. So those metrics provide some value, but is that value worth some of the sizes of the airdrops we've seen? You can argue most probably not.
I will follow that on that towards the end of our discussion, because that's when I want to talk more about airdrops. And I know we've discussed that also, that there are also different strategies of launching the airdrops to promote a long-term retention in the ecosystem. But back to the product market fit, what would you say are the signals that the founders should be looking at that they found the product market fit?
I mean, it's always good to use examples. How many of us have heard of Hyperliquid? Okay, quite a lot of us. Hyperliquid is a great example because they found product market fit. No surprise, it revolved around trading, because again, that's one of the main use cases we have in crypto so far. They found PMF. Once you have data, it becomes a lot easier to see where a token can fit in from a utility standpoint. One of our core tenets is that for every interaction is a possible on-chain transaction. Once you have that data, it becomes a lot easier to actually design something based on real data versus, okay, we think that's going to work. Because there's a product there, you have the user data, and then you're able to do an airdrop where users are already using the platform. Versus what we see in a lot of crypto is, again, follow, share, retweet, do some activations. Here's a token, and maybe in 6 months' time we'll have some utility. Maybe in a year's time we'll have some utility. Oh, you can do some staking, and normally the staking is for more tokens. Now, staking as a product, in theory it works. What it allows you to do is actually buys founders time to find product market fit, but what we're finding is founders are not finding PMF, and they're delaying the inevitable sell pressure that's coming in from these stake tokens, but then also from the token rewards that are coming in. So when we start to think of what does PMF look like in Web3, if I'm designing a product for maybe Web2 users that's not around the financialization, for your token, there needs to be what we call some kind of gamified staking, maybe as a core tenant, where people are staking their tokens and the rewards aren't just more tokens. There has to be other forms of reward as well. We tend to think of value in Web3 being economic value, but there are other kinds of value that we see in Web2. So for example, I'm a massive football fan. If there's some kind of activation, would I rather win some tokens or earn some tokens, or maybe earn a VIP experience on a match day? I probably prefer the VIP experience on a match day. These are the kind of rewards we need to be thinking about when we're looking at engaging users, is giving them something of value that's not necessarily economic value. But because everything is just money, free money, we're attracting people who have no interest in the underlying ecosystems or the underlying dApps. And it's just, okay, I'm going to grind for an airdrop. We see all of these bot farms have been rising, and it's just you're ending up giving a lot of value to people who are actually providing no value whatsoever. It turns into a rigged game.
Yeah, absolutely. Thinking about the comparison between Web 2 and Web 3. In the Web 2, a lot of the products are built kind of to raise awareness and conversion, and then maybe something happens. Web 3 products are built very differently, because once you have a token, you need really to look at the retention differently. You need the constant use of the products. You need to build community, a lot of a word that has to be in every discussion about Web3, I think. And how do you, in the Web 2, you can also find comparison with different loyalty programs. Everyone is trying to keep the users kind of in their ecosystem, or within the range of the product. How do you, what is your experiences from building retention? Because that also links with the utility of the token. How do you approach it, and how do you kind of build this long-term engagement?
So I think from a psychology perspective, I want to ask you, how many of us remember when Facebook or Meta acquired WhatsApp a few years ago? How many of us thought our data is not safe? How many of us downloaded Telegram or Signal and thought this is going to be, how many of us are still using WhatsApp? And I think that's the point exactly. Even us who are native in the space, who understand what it means to own our data, we still use WhatsApp. Why? Because that's where critical mass is. I'm not going to use Signal if it's just 3 or 4 of us on Signal, but my family, my friends are all on WhatsApp. So we tend, as humans, it's the herd mentality fundamentally, so we go where everyone else is, which then, sort of coming back to the question you asked, raises a number of challenges that if I'm building a product in Web 2, we cannot sell the benefits of the technology, because people into Web 2 do not care about ownership. Why? They don't understand the value of ownership as of yet. So we have to start on the experience side. And I mean, a great example is actually looking at pre-existing Web2 products that have PMF, who are then slowly integrating blockchain in the back end. A great example of that, FIFA Rivals. How many of us are football fans? Okay, quite a few of us. So FIFA Rivals is a game. You can download it. It's a mobile-based game. You're interacting. You have no idea that a lot of the marketplace trading is happening is actually on chain. So it's a soft entry for Web2 users to start learning about Web3, not from a technology standpoint, just I'm able to interact in a P2P marketplace. Stage one. What if down the line I unlock, I don't know, a Lionel Messi 99 rated 1/1 card? Then I realize someone is willing to pay 100,000, 150,000 for this card, for this NFT. All of a sudden, I have an intrinsic motivation to learn more about the technology because I have something of value, versus going through the steps that Brett was showing. I have to go on an exchange, I then have to KYC, I have to get this token, I have to bridge this token, and then I can stake to get access. There is so much friction in that process. We wonder why adoption isn't here yet. So it's more the case of how can we build experiences, regardless of what that is, if it's gaming, if it's social, hit critical mass, and then slowly start educating users based on their experience within a Web2 ecosystem. Then they can start understanding the value of ownership. I feel we've hit a saturation point in the space for how many people are coming in for the sake of the technology, for the sake of I get to own my assets, I get to own my IP. The majority of people in Web2 don't understand the value of that, so naturally don't really care.
Yeah, it's also like about the narratives that are being promoted, like what kind of information about what is actually happening in crypto gets to the mainstream media. It's usually not very positive. So whatever value is then kind of like sold like through the industry gets always like crashed by those narratives, and kind of avoiding the negative and like focusing on the positive, on what can be built. And also like communicating that this is still very experimental, that there are also like different projects trying different ways, and we don't really know what's going to work and what's not going to work. But okay, let's say we found a product market fit. Let's say we have a strategy for retention, and then like how does the tokenomics evolve as the product ages? And
so I think just based on that, there's a core tenet when a token launches, people look at the white paper, they look at the tokenomics, and they think this is going to be the tokenomics forever, which is a very wrong mindset to have. For a lot of founders who are maybe first-time founders or come from Web2, they think of TGE as equivalent to an IPO, that this is where I can rest. And it's actually quite the opposite in Web3, that once your token is live, you don't just have your shareholders who have maybe equity in the company, you've got all of your community members who hold tokens, which is a form of ownership, even though it's not direct ownership. So you're actually responsible for a lot more of your community, of your user base. So, I'm firing a blank, give me a sec. So with that in mind, that's it, TGE. So TGE is actually the beginning. I akin it to childbirth. When a child is born, if you leave a child on the side by itself, it's going to die. I mean, it's not nice to hear that, but it's true. Exactly the same with a token. Like we sometimes see projects or the community CTO a token once the founders disappeared, but more often than not, you really have to care for your token economy and give it not even a soft guiding hand, but a strong guiding hand at the beginning until it matures into a teenager or a young adult. And you can argue Bitcoin is the most mature token economy that we have, followed by Ethereum because they've been around for a while, but also we've seen from an Ethereum standpoint, the innovation in the building. I remember in 2018, you had all of these Ethereum killers that are launching, and now everyone wants to plug into Ethereum because that's where the most amount of stablecoin transactions are taking place. So the mindset changed from Ethereum killers to how can we plug into an ecosystem that works. But then back to the point, once a token is live and people are interacting, you have data. You have real data, and that's where a token economy is actually dynamic. It has to be something that's changing and iterating over time based on what's happening macro, but based on what's happening within that token ecosystem, how people are interacting. You have a treasury fundamentally, and the purpose of that treasury is to grow the ecosystem. So you have a monetary policy. And as we see with any GDP, there's always, every year, there's some kind of budget that's announced. This is what we're doing. We're raising taxes here. We're lowering taxes there. These are some of the concessions that we're making. It has to be a very similar mindset in Web3 when it comes to tokens so that it can evolve and grow over time.
How much would you say that experimentation with utility is allowed once token is live? how like without distorting the behavior?
I think every token, I'm a mathematician, so every token launch is hypothesis testing. Fundamentally, this is the hypothesis, this is what we think is going to happen based on previous data. And then it goes into the wild and you see, were we right, were we wrong, iterate and rinse, repeat. So it's all an experiment, if I'm being completely honest, until you've hit critical mass. And the critical mass could be a number of users, could be in market cap, could be in having a high number of tokens, or percentage of tokens in circulation, with a sustained market cap over time. Like, we can define critical mass in many different ways. So I think that's one way to start to look at it.
Yeah. I said that we will get back to the airdrops, and I would like to look at it now because, I mean, we're kind of like getting in the zooming out more towards the ecosystem building. And we want to take an example, Animoca.
Yes.
Because, I mean, you basically created a token to integrate all the projects in the portfolio and to allow them to interact. Can you tell us like about the process of designing, of launching?
Absolutely. So to provide some context, like we have, for Animoca brands, officially we have over 560 portfolio companies. The unofficial numbers are way over 600. We launched Mochaverse as sort of like having a number of different layers. One of the layers you can think about it is a reputation or identity layer. Another layer is how can we use Mochaverse as a launchpad for other ecosystems. So keep that in mind. We had an NFT collection, as you do in the space. And really what we were looking at, we have an idea as well, and what we were looking at pre-TGE was how users were engaging with the different activations we were giving them with different partners. So we had a number of different data points. What we also looked at is historically when airdrops happen, it tends to be you get all of your airdrop up front, it's unlocked, and over 80% of people dump, as you were saying right at the beginning. So how can we circumvent this? So actually part of it is identifying your user base. So what we did was give people, as part of the user journey for claiming the airdrop, they had two options. I can claim all of my tokens up front, or I can claim some of my tokens up front and have some kind of delayed gratification and have some more tokens, bonus tokens later on. Now, the purpose of this was identifying the user base. Now, what the users didn't know is those who claimed, I want my tokens up front, there was a tax. It was never portrayed this way because narrative is very important, but we actually gave them less tokens than what they should have had. And I won't go into the percentage details because I'm probably going to get some stick from the community later on for this. But we also knew that the likelihood that these people were going to dump. For those who claim later, we wanted to give them some liquidity up front. And the reason for that is we had staking ready again as part of that user journey. So not only am I claiming my tokens, we got to identify the user type, and then I can instantly stake as part of that. Now, what am I staking for? I'm staking for staking power. Ooh, another point system. What can I do with staking power? Actually, staking power showcases your initial reputation within the ecosystem. That I'm here, I'm staking my assets, I have no intention of leaving the ecosystem. And as a reward, when we're launching partner projects and there's different activations that people have to do, they then get some of those tokens based on the staking power that they have and based on burning their staking power. Now, what that begins to do over time is build up reputation, because you can see, okay, this is someone who staked their Mocha NFT, their Mocha tokens. They've now burnt some of that staking power. They've claimed a token for one of our partners, and then they've staked those tokens within that ecosystem as well. And you can start to see how a reputation is beginning to be built. So we know who's providing value and who isn't. But what we're not doing is just saying, here's free tokens, dump, I'm going to continue to give you free tokens over time. So that then became an interesting value proposition, because what we saw were that those who claimed, I think it was about 60% decided to go for the claim later option, which is quite high. And the majority of those then staked most of their assets. Some took some profits, and there's no issue with taking some profit, but the majority of them then staked their assets to showcase their commitment to the ecosystem. And actually they're more power users than farmers looking for a quick buck.
Once you have a user base, how do you balance the incentive so that like everyone in the ecosystem would be actually incentivized to engage? Because you have a different layers, different contributors. Contributors need to also like exchange the tokens for fiat because they need to pay rent, they need to pay like function in the real world. Investors don't need to do that. They're more like interested in maybe like staking and growing the tokens. But then the creates imbalances between the active contributors and between those who can like afford just to stake the tokens and let it sit.
So the beauty of once you have a token live is you have the on-chain analytics, which is why on-chain analytics is so important. But what you also have is the social analytics. I think just to take a step back, earlier I said there are different types of value. So there is a French philosopher, Pierre Bourdieu, and he stated there's 4 kinds of value. There's the economic value that we know, there's cultural value, there's social value, and there's symbolic value. So economic is what we focus on, but we've also seen aspects of maybe, let's say, symbolic value, that I have a one-of-one NFT. There's symbolic nature in that. Or even through NFT collections we saw in 2021, it was a great way to interact with people. Like if I've got a Bored Ape and someone else has a Bored Ape, there's that inherent trust that's there because we share an NFT from the same connection, and that sort of gave you that cultural and social aspect as well. So then coming back to your question, it's understanding the different user personas, and based on the personas, the different user behaviors. But then how can we add value given that there's 4 types of value? For some people, it's the economic aspect. For others, it could be raising awareness on the timeline in terms of this is what's happening. When you have a user base, like one of the powers of tokens outside of speculation is you actually have an army of marketeers who want that value of the token to go up, but can actually educate others in terms of this is why I'm holding the token. This is what this ecosystem is building. This is the value that's come back to me. And that acts as opposed to you having an additional marketing spend, actually the airdrop is a form of marketing and a form of user acquisition. But as we've been discussing, you're acquiring the wrong users. So it's super important when doing an airdrop to understand who you're airdropping value to. Otherwise, I think we've all seen the graphs. You launch at a high valuation, you do an airdrop, and the token price drops. 99% of tokens look like that. Outside of meme coins that just look like that and die within the first 48 hours. So it's how can you have a positive chart at TGE, because any new participant coming in, the first thing they're going to look at is what's the price action look like. And if the price action is that or it's this, instantly it's just like this token is down 97%. Retail have wisened up so much. Like how many of us have been in crypto for over or from 2021 or pre-2021? Okay, so quite a few of us. If you were retail back then, you're not interacting with tokens or NFTs to make money in the same way then as you are today. The hype cycle doesn't sustain because people have realized if I'm retail, I'm most likely exit liquidity. So if I believe in an ecosystem, let me wait for the initial pump and dump. And if this team is actually building, let me buy one of the tokens at a much lower price point. But it's very hard because there's been a dilution of attention in this space as well. And we're seeing so many new projects launching, so many new protocols launching. It's like every man and his dog has a layer 2, a layer 3. We even have layer 4s now. And it's like, okay, well, I honestly see in the next 5 years, a number of these or a lot of these chains will die because there's a fragmentation of user base, fragmentation of liquidity. And from an attention standpoint, it's activating the initial attention is great. We're very bad as an industry from a retention perspective. And that's what I think we're gonna see more focus on retention moving forward for Web3 users.
You already partly answered my question. I wanted to take Emily's suggestion and ask about like how do you see the development from the time that you started to be solely focused on tokenomics? Like how has the approach of the teams changed when they think about tokenomics for their project, and what do you think, like how is that going to develop?
I think a lot of founders don't value the importance of tokenomics until they launch and the token goes really badly. And then it's like, shit, we should have listened. The amount of time that's happened has been very frustrating. And I think it's a challenge because on one side you have a founder who has a vision, who wants to launch a product, but they also want to launch a token because it's a good way to raise funds. And then you have different types of VCs. You have some VCs who genuinely see the long-term value and invest, and they're happy to invest in the long-term value, and other VCs or angel investors who are just after a quick flip. How can I put money in and invest as much of that as quickly as possible? And we need to start identifying in the same way who are the good users to airdrop to, who are the good VCs that we should be raising funds from. A lot of the thinking is quite short-term. How can I raise enough capital to have a long enough runway to get me to TGE, and then I can worry about everything else after. But in doing so, you're siloing your thinking to very short term, and it's quite difficult to recover from a token launch that's gone quite badly because you've lost the attention, and it's very difficult to bring that attention back.
I wanted to leave more time, but we have 45 seconds. We have time for one question from the audience. Does anyone want to ask? Yes. Oh. We're recording the session, so I need to give you the...
I liked your version of separating the users by asking whether they are interested in receiving all the tokens at once. You have other tools like that, or other methods that you've tested like that, of separating the users or identifying real users versus the farmers?
Yeah, I mean, it's very easy when someone connects their wallet or wallets for you to be able to look at their historic on-chain activity, and that can help define the persona around the user. Is this someone who's received airdrops and dumped? Is this someone, even when they buy tokens, they're just looking for a quick flip, so to speak? Like, the beauty of blockchain is having all of this on-chain data that you cannot hide it. So, but you need to get people to connect their wallet, for example. But how many of us have one wallet and one wallet only? And this is it. So I might have my good wallet, if you like, and I might have my degen wallets from that perspective.
No one should know about. No one wants exactly to see the content.
But then you're also able to do like cluster analysis, and there's different forms of analysis to be like, right, this wallet is connected to these wallets. Is this someone who's trying to Sybil attack an ecosystem, or is it just someone with multiple different wallets? And then you have wallets that are cross-chain. I might have a Phantom wallet to be dealing with my assets on Solana. I might have a MetaMask wallet to be dealing with Ethereum and EVM compatible. So then the challenge becomes, how can we get people to connect their wallets so we can have as much historic data as possible? So I think that's the best way to do it. But until you have people connecting so you can actually understand who that user base is and how have they acted historically, it's really at the point of an airdrop happening, giving people different choices and seeing how they react, assuming, or it's anyone coming into a new ecosystem, there's zero reputation. And it's how can you build that reputation over time? And you can start building that reputation outside of the historic data we've been speaking about, from how they interact within your token ecosystem at the point of airdrop, to understand, am I in this for the long run, or am I someone who's looking for a quick flip? And then based on people's decisions, you can then dynamically adjust the value that they're getting.
We've run out of time. Thank you very much, Mo, for your insights. I hope everyone enjoyed it.
Excellent. Thank you very much.